On tonight's Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe, it is question and answer night. Get your questions ready because Ben is here to answer all those questions on tonight's show. We'll be back in just a moment.
DJ Event Planner will change the way you manage and run your business. Streamline all of your procedures and software into one easy-to-manage system. DJ Event Planner, the ultimate online planning tool.
All right, we are back. It is Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. That means that every question you've ever wanted to know about any topic is now game for the one and only Ben Stowe. Good evening, Ben.
Bring it on. What do you got?
Well, I have some. And then the chat rooms are going to be bringing out the best of the best questions. Actually, there's a couple of folks who had some questions. They're like, yeah, I've got a question, but I'm going to ask it during the show. So what you guys do, put those into the chats, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and I will be bouncing back and forth to get those. So I think the very first question we're going to get to, which is not on my list, is from Day. I'm going to convert your message just a little bit. Day's question is basically, should I quit my day job so I can watch more of the Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe shows?
You know, Dave, a lot of questions I answer with the phrase, it depends. But this one, I think we can just go with a flat, absolutely. Absolutely, you should.
So there you are. That you can take that to the bank and tell the significant other, yes, Ben said.
You know, the only thing is I think we only have about 140 shows. So let's say that's, approximately 45 minutes per show. That's only going to take care of a few months for you.
That's true.
You might want to keep the job just as a fallback, you know.
It's always good to be cautious and be prepared.
And we can only crank these shows out so fast.
We're going to continue into chat room questions, and we'll get to the others, or we may never get to those. How much damage can you do to a K12 if you clip the input? And yet,
John, I'm not even sure how to answer that question. It depends on how badly you clip it, I suppose. Worst case scenario, you could cause substantial damage, fatal damage. Mm-hmm. I think, occasionally clipping the input, you're probably not likely to cause much or any damage. You're just clipping off the waveform. But if you, that's a tough one to answer. I would avoid doing it, though, certainly as much as possible.
So now, just to clarify,
because it doesn't sound good,
But let's kind of dig into this one just a little bit, Ben. So if I'm clipping the sound from my board, basically is clipping in this particular this situation, and it's sending this nasty signal to the speaker. Mm-hmm. Now, the speaker most likely has some things built into it. In the Electro Voice world, we know that they have the limiting things that starts to do it. None of that protection would help the speaker to prevent it from hurting itself in this configuration with this problem, correct?
Well, no, not necessarily. It wouldn't, and certainly it won't improve the sound, because once that signal is clipped, it's clipped all the way through. You can only make that clipped signal louder. You can't unclip the signal at that point. And so when you look at the musicality of a clipped signal, or the lack thereof, really, and we think about what translating that from an electrical signal and a waveform into cone movement. We could begin to see where that would be problematic for a speaker. So here again, without splitting hairs into, how bad is it and at what point does it become a wrecking ball for your system? just avoid it. Certainly. Again, a momentary instance probably isn't going to be, really consequential. And I say probably because I certainly wouldn't go on record and say definitely,
Right.
it won't hurt it, because it could. But, more than likely a momentary thing isn't going to be the end of the world, but certainly is not something you want to go into a gig with. If you have a clipped signal in your mixer or anywhere else in your gain structure, fix it. Simple, really,
So let's go back to the old days when we used to run, coming out of our mixer, we would go into an amplifier and then go out to speakers. We didn't have a lot of the different compression, or I should say the limiting and different things such as that. It was just basically amplifier speakers. If I would have sent that clip signal to my amplifier and then out to my speakers, which device would have gotten damaged from that clip signal if I would have been doing it too much? Would my amplifier have gotten toast, or would my speakers have gotten fried?
A lot of variables in the types of amplifiers out there and the types of circuitry. I think I'm just going to throw a dart at this one and say probably the speaker cone.
Okay.
Probably, but here again, we're talking about things that there's so many variables. And even in a laboratory, I suppose we could probably come up with many conflicting answers to this question.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for the sake of simplicity, and I know that we want to go down this macabre, morbid path of what will we kill first, but I think I'd rather just walk it all the way back and say, let's just not, shall we?
Certainly.
Let's just not do it. Because I guess it doesn't really matter which piece of gear dies first, something dies, And even if something doesn't die, certainly the experience and the sound of a clip signal is not going to be something we want to be putting out there for our clients. So if we have one, we should retool our gain structure and fix said clipped signal. So you mentioned, like having an amplifier outboard of a speaker and that sort of thing. And even if we did have something like a drive rack or an outboard compressor or some other DSP, we could have all the tools that we have in a powered loudspeaker just outside of the loudspeaker. But fundamentally, the problem is the same.
So now, in order to alleviate that, we would have to reduce the output from our board because our board is being pushed too hard. Now, if to be able to still get volume but not push the board too hard, what would be? Let's go back to our powered speakers. I believe he was referring to K12s. With that, would it be better to then turn the K12 instead of maybe having it at 0, is to maybe turn it up to 2 or 3? So it is now amplifying that input signal more, or what would be your best suggestion for that?
It depends. So let's go back and take, I'm sorry, but
no,
it does.
That's okay. They're having more fun every time you mention depends. They're like, I'm guessing it's become a pulling out your Pepsi and having a swig of Pepsi when you say depends. I'm guessing that's what's happened.
Right into a drinking game. Well, I got good old fashioned Chicago water here, so. Let's go back with the understanding that it's possible that we could be clipping the input of our mixing board. So it could be that it's not even the channel level on the mixing board, the channel fader, and it's not even the main fader on the mixing board. It could be the input side of the mixing board is clipping. So we could be clipping that thing all the way through. So I think rather than talking about where we would turn it up or down, let's just talk about gain structure again. This is a topic I think we just can't talk about too much. And let's say that basically what we want to do in every instance with gain structure is start at the input side and work our way through. So we would want to find the ideal input gain. Then we would be able to use our channel faders. Then we would be able to use our master fader to set our output level. Then we would go to our amplifier or the amplifier in our powered loudspeaker, which is the same thing, just depends on where it lives, and adjust the trim there. So by doing so, you're going to be able to get the loudest, cleanest signal. You're going to have the best signal to noise ratio, and you're also going to avoid clipping the signal at any gain stage. So the answer of where to turn it up is, again, it depends. I would just go back to the beginning and look at the gain structure all the way through. It's not very time consuming, and you'll be stunned at how much better the whole system sounds all the way through.
Okay, good. We're
gonna be.
No, that was good. No, that was good. That was good. We got some good information there for those people who are struggling with that. We took you in a couple of different directions, and you gave some good advice. And then you got into that car chase, that Sith Lord thing, and then that got kind of boring. But then you came back, and we're good.
Well, let's just leave it there then. But the short answer to the direct question you asked me is maybe we would be turning it down on the mixer and turning it up on the speaker. But again,
could be. There's
just walk through the process.
Lots of variables. Yep, good. So if you guys have questions, put them into the chat here. I've got the next one we're going to actually get to, which is one I've had a few people asking about, and I'm not sure, this one may be outside of your expertise, Ben, and you may not have, but I wanted to put this out there. A lot of people are concerned about the price of gear coming up in 2019 with these tariffs and things, and it raising the cost of goods coming in. The questionnaire wondering if there's going to be a certain type of gear that DJs use that's going to be affected the most. Will there be some things that aren't affected at all, and such? If you could give some insight into that.
Well, I'm a pretty good geek. I am not a tariff lawyer, so I'll tell you, it is. I think I have some answers for you, but it's becoming more difficult to figure it out. There are some that are 10% right now, and will go to 25% in January. Tariffs largely affect products that are made in China, and many products are, but some are not. So some products are made in Taiwan, which is a different country, and the tariffs don't apply. I would say it's going to affect a lot of our things, though. We're seeing, I just got maybe 4 or 5 more emails today, another one just before the show started. And it seems to be affecting almost everybody, saying, hey, brace yourself, price increases are coming. And this seems to be affecting things, all over the board. Lights, stands, sound equipment. The one I got just before the show was from QSC. I think what we're going to see is fairly across the board increases. I don't know that I could tell you which ones we will and won't. Some manufacturers were stocked deeper, and so they were able to hold on longer before the tariffs became an impact.
Sure.
Others, of course, the tariffs are sort of staggered. I would just say expect gear to cost more in 2019. So there are some definite reasons to look at getting gear by the end of this year. There's all kinds of changes with taxes and things coming too, as I understand it. So by getting the gear now, you can write the gear off on this year's taxes. You can avoid those tariffs. But don't buy gear you don't need. I'm not saying that, but if you need something, this might be the time to do it. I think there will be very little that is going to cost less in 2019. I would venture to guess almost everything is going to cost more in 2019.
Yeah, it's just kind of surprising as you're reading in the paper and you're looking at even businesses within the handyman realm, these even companies that you think it's like, they've got their, Polaris as an example. How much of the Polaris Ranger is direct is Chinese? It comes from China, is assembled here, and how that they were saying that's going to add millions of dollars to their costs for 2019. It's just kind of mind blowing to a point that how this is all going to get down and eventually affect us.
Ironically, and I guess it really shouldn't be ironic because obviously this is something everybody's watching and I'm keeping a close eye on, is I was just reading an article from South China Morning News about tariffs and about, the strategy and how even Chinese manufacturers are moving their production out of China. Companies that are based in China are moving their manufacturing facilities out of China to get away from these tariffs. Many U.S. manufacturers are front-loading orders. They're ordering in more now to try to get inventory in before the tariffs. But sooner or later, this is going to, take effect. But it's also affecting U.S. manufacturers because it's created an increase in the cost of some raw materials, the increase in steel and that sort of thing. I realize this is election day and some people, are very much in favor of the tariffs. Obviously it's created a lot of jobs in the Iron Range here in Minnesota. Some people are vehemently against the tariffs and they're against the people that passed the tariffs. Look, this isn't a political thing. I don't know if the tariffs are good or bad. I think history will tell us. We maybe won't even know for 20 years.
Yep.
But setting all that aside, in a much smaller world where I live here with just, looking out for you and your gear, I'm just going to tell you, I think almost everything's going to cost more in 2019. We also have, some inflationary pressure. So there's there's really nothing to indicate, and I'm not an economist, but I am the president of a company, so I have to look at these things.
No, for
I
sure.
don't think much is going to be cheaper in 2019.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that's going to be cheaper in 2019, gear or otherwise.
Yeah, just the way it will be. Okay, I'm going to check here. Our next question that we have is somebody is asking for a wedding. They wanted to illuminate the head table, the people sitting behind a head table, and make it so that their faces would be better for video and that the guests can see them a little bit better. But they didn't want it to be so bright in their faces that the wedding party is squinting the whole time. Is there some methodology of lighting that would help in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, try to get the lights maybe higher. Obviously, you don't want kind of the Blair Witch look. And actually, I'm a pretty good example of this right now because the light is very much over me. We can see shadows in the lower part of my face. So you don't want to go too high, but having those lights not coming directly at them, but coming from a higher angle or off to the sides is going to help. Putting some diffusion on it might help. Certainly look at good maybe 3,700, 4,000, Kelvin's color temperature, having good consistent color temp so you don't just completely blow out the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
If you're also doing the video, that's much easier because then you can white balance to your own lights. But I think this is, if not, an opportunity to coordinate with the video contractor and work with them and make sure that you have a color temp that they're happy with. You might, I'm taking this really as far as I can go with it. I think here to say you might even want to have some CTO filters or something handy, if necessary, to adjust the color temp. But most modern cameras can white balance pretty well with whatever you got. I just wouldn't go with something that's, 7K and blast it at them,
It'd be pretty intense.
It would. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, folks.
Just to avoid the, I think, everybody's driven in the, at night in a car. Avoid sort of the oncoming headlight look. You don't want that light coming right at them. That's going to create the most difficulty and the most discomfort for them.
Our next question. They're looking for a way to do music videos at their events, and they want something that will give them the most flexibility for smaller setup spaces. They're debating between doing televisions on some sort of a stand, whether it's a trussing stand is what they refer to it as, or if they should do a projector and screen. Which direction would you recommend them or steer them for more flexibility within their setup?
TVs on totems, TVs on quad stands like the Gator, projection screens, video walls. Fielder's choice. Certainly TVs on totems or the Gator stands are going to be smaller and easier to move around and more flexible. At the same time, though, it's a smaller screen. If you need a bigger screen and you need a bigger impact, then a projection screen might be, your best bet. And I know you didn't mention specifically video walls, LED wall, but I'll throw it in there.
Sure.
That's probably the most versatile and least flexible option. They tend to be heavier, consume more power, but they're much brighter. So I don't know that there's an easy answer to this one. I think it fits your individual event and your vision, your ability to transport, your budget. There's a lot of individuality to this.
You mentioned Gator, and I saw that stand. It isn't a traditional lighting stand. For those who haven't seen that, can you kind of describe that a little bit and give it kind of a compare and contrast from a traditional light stand?
I'd love to, because we have a bunch of them in stock. So we're in a very charitable mood. And as we approach the end of the year, we'd like to reduce our inventory a little bit. So there's an opportunity for you. Excuse me, I'm choking on this delicious Chicago water here. Anyway, unlike a traditional tripod stand, these are a quad pod, which ever so cleverly just means it has 4 legs. But instead of a traditional tripod format, you can just imagine it having 4 legs coming out, similarly styled to a tripod, though. And on top, it has a TV mount bracket, or a display mount bracket, I guess we would say now. and that just very easily attaches and detaches from the stand. So in many cases, you could leave that on the back of your display, put it in the road case, take it out, just pop it on the stand. A very, very quick setup.
Now with the quad stand, it has. Would you put it where you would have the legs where one leg would go forward, or would you go with two legs forward and two back, or what would be the most secure way to use that stand?
Well, I think here is another it depends moment. Probably in most cases, I would just go two forward and two back, keeping the lines of the legs somewhat parallel to the surface of the display. If for some particular reason you needed more support forward backward, you could diamond it a little bit. But I've found the stand to be so stable that I don't think I can imagine a scenario where that's necessary. So I would put it with the two legs facing forward like this and the other two facing back like that.
How tall will that get a display?
I don't know.
Because I was thinking about that. I saw those at a couple of the shows, but I don't remember if those will get up 6 or 7 feet.
I think it'll get up about 6 or 7.
I think so.
I don't think it's so much higher than that, but I think that's about what it gets up to. I do apologize. That I'd have to look up.
Yeah, I don't remember either. That was just a thought at the top of my head because they were showing displays and it was like, oh yeah, there it is, right at an optimal viewing height as you're standing there. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think they do an appropriate job for what they're designed for. If you want to put a display 10 feet in the air, they're not really an option.
Yeah, just doesn't have the base for that.
But I think if you wanted to put a display 6-7 feet in the air, I think they're a great option. And again, I don't recall the exact height, but I remember the times I've had them out and have used them, feeling very good about them. I know that Katie from our sales team actually uses them at gigs. She has a couple that she uses regularly. So, she'd be a great person to ask questions about them too.
And if you call her and tell her that you heard about them on Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe, she'll get you a special deal.
Or if you happen to be out at the Wedding MBA right now, and kudos to you for taking your time out in Vegas to watch us. We do thank you for that. But if you happen to be out there, she's out there.
Oh, excellent.
Her and Kat are both out there. And I think that's going to cause a few people's heads to explode because some people don't realize that Kat and Katie are two different people. And it does create some confusion. And of course, they both spell their names with a K and their last names both start with a C. And so I think that lends itself to more confusion. But we do get people who occasionally call and will be talking to one or the other and saying, well, I just talked to you yesterday. How come you don't remember this conversation? It's like, because it wasn't with me. In fact, one person called and said, yeah, can I talk to Kat or Katie or whatever she's calling herself now? And we're like, well,
two different people. Who are you?
I guess it depends on which one you want to talk to. So anyway, they're both out there. And so you can go see that they are both real people and they both really exist. And they both love to see you if you're out at the wedding event.
Excellent. I got a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap up since you are on remote. I don't want to keep it too long. Somebody asked a question, which we probably covered this 10 times over, but just to give your gut response to this, what is one piece of specialty gear that every DJ should have?
Oof. Like 10 things just came to my mind instantly.
I know, one. What's the pick one? It's like you got to have this. Boom.
One piece of gear that every DJ should have.
Yes.
Well, I guess I could be sly about this and say a speaker. Hard to be a DJ without a speaker.
No. I want specifics.
I feel like every DJ should have a multimeter. I think I'm going to go that direction because it's not a typical piece of gear that DJs maybe would have in their rig. Certainly, it's not mission critical to the act of DJing, but I think it's mission critical to the act of continuing to DJ. I would say a multimeter is probably the first thing that comes to my mind. Mm-hmm. But boy, it's tough to limit it to just one. It's really tough to say if you have this one thing, you're set, because I don't think that's fair.
I don't think so either. Yeah, true. Chris mentions Gaff Tape, and that would certainly be one. I was going to myself as I was thinking about this. My first was to go to a high-end multi tool. Not a cheap one, but a $70, $80, $90, $120 one that can cut, strip, whatever you need to basically stitch things up, or what, that level. Because there's so many.
You make a lot of good arguments for a lot of different things, and I would agree with Chris 100%. Gaff tape is a necessity for DJs. I wouldn't agree that gaff tape is gear, and that's just a distinction in my mind. I would call it a consumable, a supply.
Yep.
But again, I'm splitting hairs. I mean, I would agree with Chris. That's absolutely, you should have gaff tape. I mean, that's inconceivable to me. That I don't know how you. I just don't know how I'd live without it at this point, Yeah. But I think the list of things I don't know how I'd live without are pretty long right now. I think if I was going to be deserted on a desert island, I'd probably need things like a multimeter, gaff tape, a parametric EQ, I'd probably get some weird looks if somebody asked me what I needed on a desert island.
That would be. Why is that guy got a multimeter out there on a desert island? There's no electricity. But you haven't seen what I'm going to do with my bubblegum wrapper and this little bottle of ammonia. Anyway.
I'm bringing MacGyver back. I'm making MacGyver cool again, He was always cool, let's be honest. MacGyver was never not cool.
Anyone who can disable alarm systems with Wrigley's chewing gum wrappers. That's awesome. Last question we're going to hit here, and then we'll be bouncing off. Jimmy was actually talking about this one earlier. He was wondering, he's got a Sennheiser wireless microphone, and one of the antennas on the back kind of wasn't working properly. I think it broke or something. And he was wondering, A, can they be replaced? And B, should it be replaced with the same, and how to find the right antenna, and can you upgrade the antennas on these types of wireless microphone systems so you have more coverage?
I counted 3 questions in there.
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to get. He was giving me these things, and I was hoping he would be here too. So can they be replaced?
Let's take them one at a time as I remember them.
Yeah, please.
1, can they be replaced? Yes. Any mic system with removable BNC antennas or TNC antennas, those antennas can be replaced. That's not exclusive to Sennheiser, but any system where the antennas are removable, almost certainly there are antennas available to put on there. Number 2 was where to find the replacements, right? I think if I remember correctly.
Yep, that's part of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly we sell them, and there are many other places that do as well. One thing that is really important is that antennas are tuned to a wavelength. The length of the antenna is tuned to the radio frequency that it will resonate at, and thus works effectively as an antenna. The ones that typically come with systems are called a quarter wave antenna, which will lead us to number 3 here in a second. And so it's really important to get the right antenna. So make sure you get the right frequency antenna for your system. And again, there's a lot of places you can get those. Certainly, if you want to reach out to us, just tell me the frequency of your system, and I'll help you get the right antenna for it. Myself or my coworker, we're happy to do that.
Okay, so let's put a pause right there before we get to how to upgrade. If you get an antenna that isn't to the proper frequency, will it even function, or will it be diminished, or will there be like nothing?
No, it'll function. It just won't function as well.
Okay.
It will work. And you may not even notice that it's not as effective as it could or should be. Particularly in a true diversity system where we have 2 antennas receiving, the radio may just favor the other antenna, which of course compromises your diversity. And I guess the moral of this story is, in a pinch, any antenna is better than no antenna.
That's where I was kind of going with that. So, okay. So the final thing.
Optimally, if you're going to spend your money, you want the right one, and like I said, there's a lot of places you can get them. We're just one of those places. So, of course we'd love to help you, but we're not the only place. Number 3, because most of these systems come with a quarter wave antenna, you can upgrade to a number of different types of antennas. And John, I remember back, I think in 2014 or 15, you and I did a show on antennas, and I had a big table full of them, worth a watch if you want to learn a lot about antennas. But I'll give you the short version here. Quarter wave antennas are called that because they're a quarter of the wavelength. And we just talked about antennas being tuned to a wavelength that they resonate at. And so a half wave antenna would be an upgrade from that, and it's about twice as long as a quarter wave antenna. In the theoretical realm, it's going to give us about 3 dB more reception power. So that's an upgrade. But there's another really big upgrade in that. Quarter wave antennas are monopoles, and they require a ground plane to work properly. They have to be attached to the chassis of the receiver or its rack kit or something that shares its ground plane, whereas a half wave antenna can be mounted anywhere. So you could mount that remotely on your rack somewhere. You could mount it out on a stand. But a half wave antenna does not have to be attached to that ground plane. So it's an upgrade not only in that it's going to give you more gain, but it's also going to allow you to mount it remotely. And then kind of the last thing I think we'll talk about are like the shark fins or the bat wings, or as nerds like me like to call them, log periodic arrays, LPAs. Paddles. LPA antennas are directional antennas that are going to give you even more gain and in a focused direction. So they're going to allow us to have more reception in the direction we want and more rejection in the direction that we don't need a signal coming from. So to me, that's the ultimate solution. You can mount those on mic stands. We actually have a nifty little package with 2 of them and cables and a bar that mounts them on a stand for you, very, very, very affordably. And that's going to give you really, really good reception. And by the way, I just want to toss this in, bonus points, because somebody asked this question. It was a good question. I think, if I remember correctly from the forum, it was Mike Regan that asked the question. But anyway, it was asking, in the manufacturer's documentation, it says these antennas should be 1 meter apart, but we sell a bar that places them only about 14 inches apart. And he says, why does this work? And I explained the wavelength and frequency, and these paddles are broadband. They're from 470 to 900 and all this sort of thing. And I told him, really, we only need to have them about 6 inches apart. And just for sport, I asked the application engineer who works for the factory that makes these antennas, and it was really humoring to me that his reply was almost word for word what I had said. So for those that are wondering, if you see that documentation, there's direct validation from the manufacturer. I'm not an idiot. It's just physics. We don't have to have them 1 meter apart. You really only need to have them about 6 inches apart. So
Wonderful. Ben, that wraps up our questions. Thank you much for your time tonight, and we are going to let you get back to the lovely city of Chicago.
I do like it here. Obviously, come here fairly often to teach this class here. I've got a great group of young future stage technicians, very enthusiastic and excited to join our industry. And downtown Chicago, you can't walk 20 steps in any direction blindfolded without bumping into a great place to eat. So, I'm all about food. I'm pretty happy.
Sounds great. Ben, you have yourself a great evening. Gang, we'll be back at 10 o'clock Eastern with Brian Red tonight.
Thanks.